The mountain highway curved through northern Italy like a ribbon of black silk draped across ancient stone. Sunlight filtered through cypress trees, casting long shadows across the weathered parking lot of Café della Montagna, a roadside café that had witnessed 50 years of travelers, lovers, and secrets. A black Ducati Panigale V4 rolled to a stop beside 3 other motorcycles. The rider swung one leg over the seat with practiced grace. Gloved hands reached up. The helmet came off slowly. Long raven black hair tumbled free, catching the afternoon light like liquid obsidian. Every head in the outdoor seating area turned. She didn't notice. Or perhaps she simply didn't care. Inside the cafe, the owner's hands trembled as he reached for an espresso cup. 3 kilometers away, 3 black armored SUVs accelerated toward the mountain road. And a confident stranger with green eyes watched the mysterious woman walk toward the entrance, already composing his opening line. He had no idea that the next 5 minutes would change everything he thought he knew about power, danger, and love. Before we begin, thank you for spending part of your day with me. Whether you're listening from home, at work, on a road trip, or relaxing before bed, I'm truly grateful you're here. Tonight's story is filled with mystery, danger, unforgettable romance, and a woman whose true identity changes everything. Please like, share, and subscribe. And comment below where you're watching from so I can see just how far across the world this story has reached. Now let's begin today's unforgettable story. The afternoon sun hung low over the winding mountain highway of northern Italy, casting golden light across the weathered stone walls of Café Montagna. Motorcycles lined the gravel parking lot like sleeping predators, chrome catching fire in the dying light. Inside, espresso machines hissed their ancient songs while travelers paused between destinations. Then she arrived. A black Ducati Diavel growled up the mountain road, its engine a thunderous heartbeat against the silence. The rider dismounted with fluid grace, black leather jacket fitted perfectly to her athletic frame. When she removed her helmet, long raven hair tumbled over her shoulders like midnight silk. Every head turned. She walked inside as though she owned the mountain itself. At the bar, she ordered an espresso in a voice smooth as aged wine. Moments later, a confident stranger rose from his corner table. Broad-shouldered, green eyes sparkling with amusement. He approached with an easy smile that had opened countless doors. "That's a beautiful machine outside," he said. "Almost as striking as its rider." She smiled back, amused. "Does that line usually work?" Before he could answer, the cafe owner went pale. Outside, 3 black armored SUVs rolled into the parking lot. Armed men stepped out, their movements precise and military. Every biker instinctively lowered their eyes. The confident stranger laughed. Someone famous must have arrived. Then every armed guard walked past him, stopped in front of the woman, and bowed their heads. One quietly said, "Your Majesty, the meeting is ready." Only then did the stranger realize. The woman he'd been flirting with wasn't merely a biker. She was the Mafia queen every Don in Italy feared. Cristiano D'Angelo had built his reputation on reading people. At 36, he'd negotiated deals that would have crushed lesser men, navigated boardrooms filled with sharks, and charmed his way through the most exclusive circles of Italian society. His family's business empire, legitimate on paper, though whispers suggested deeper connections, had taught him that power wore many faces. He had never expected power to wear black leather and ride a Ducati. The woman, this queen who had laughed at his flirtation moments ago, turned to face him with those extraordinary amber eyes. In the golden afternoon light, they seemed to hold ancient secrets. "You seem surprised," she said, her voice carrying the same amused warmth from before. Cristiano found his balance. A lesser man might have stammered apologies. Instead, he inclined his head with genuine respect. "Only that I didn't recognize royalty when I saw her." Something flickered in her expression. Interest perhaps. Or curiosity. Most people don't. She glanced at the waiting guards, then back at him. "That's rather the point." Before Cristiano could respond, a woman emerged from the lead SUV. Dark pixie-cut hair. Sharp brown eyes that assessed him like a weapon evaluating a target. She wore a tailored black suit that did nothing to hide the lean muscle beneath. "We need to move," the woman said, her gaze never leaving Cristiano. "The council is waiting." The queen nodded once. She turned toward the door, then paused. Looking back over her shoulder, she offered Cristiano a smile that sent warmth spreading through his chest. "Perhaps we'll meet again," she said. "When you're not trying quite so hard." Then she was gone, swallowed by the waiting convoy. Cristiano stood in the suddenly silent cafe, his espresso growing cold on the bar beside him. The cafe owner, a weathered man named Giorgio who had served these mountain travelers for 40 years, approached with trembling hands. "Do you know who that was?" Giorgio whispered. "No." Cristiano's eyes remained fixed on the empty doorway. "But I intend to find out." Giorgio made the sign of the cross. "La Regina Nera. The Black Queen. They say she commands more loyalty than the Pope and more fear than the devil himself." "Who is she?" "No one knows her face. No one outside her inner circle anyway." Giorgio lowered his voice further. "But her name, her real name, is Giovanna Ricci. And if she smiled at you, signore, you should either count yourself blessed or start running." Cristiano pulled several bills from his wallet, far more than his espresso cost. He set them on the bar and walked toward the door. "Which would you recommend?" he asked. Giorgio's answer followed him into the mountain air. "Both." Across northern Italy, in a fortress of stone and shadow that had witnessed centuries of power-changing hands, the council awaited their queen. The Palazzo Nero rose from the Piedmont hills like a sleeping giant. Its walls, blackened by age and legend, had sheltered Ricci family secrets since the Renaissance. Now, as evening painted the sky in shades of blood and gold, those walls welcomed home their most formidable heir. Giovanna Ricci walked through corridors lined with portraits of her ancestors. Men and women who had built empires through cunning and strength. Her grandmother's eyes followed her from a painting near the Great Hall. Luciana Ricci, the matriarch who still lived, still watched, still counseled from the shadows. "You're late." Chiara Bellini fell into step beside her, tablet in hand, already scrolling through reports. "I stopped for coffee." "You stopped to play tourist." Chiara's disapproval was evident. The motorcycle, the empty highways, the anonymous cafes. "The last free breath before I'm chained to this table for the next 6 months." Giovanna's voice carried an edge that silenced her chief strategist. "I'm allowed that much, Chiara." They paused before the council chamber doors. Through the ancient wood voices rumbled, the collected power of a dozen families who had sworn allegiance to the Ricci name. Chiara softened slightly. "There was a man. At the cafe. There are always men. This one didn't run when the guards arrived. He didn't bow. He looked at you like..." Chiara searched for words. "Like you were a woman he wanted to know, not a crown he wanted to possess." Giovanna's hand rested on the door handle. "His name. We're running his plates now. The car is registered to D'Angelo Holdings." Something cold settled in Giovanna's stomach. D'Angelo. A name that had crossed her desk before, though never with any urgency. A family whose legitimate empire existed in careful proximity to her own shadow world. "Find out everything," she said. Then she pushed open the doors and became the queen they expected. The council chamber had been designed for intimidation. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into darkness overhead. Candelabras threw dancing shadows across stone walls lined with weapons from every era. Swords that had spilled blood for the Ricci name, guns that had enforced its will, knives that had silenced its enemies. 12 men sat around an oval table of polished ebony. They rose as Giovanna entered, heads bowing in deference that had been earned through blood and bone. She took her seat at the head of the table, her leather jacket replaced by a tailored black blazer. The transition was seamless, instant. The woman became the ruler and the ruler commanded attention. "Report," she said. The first hour covered territory disputes. The second addressed financial matters. Money flowing through legitimate businesses, investments that required approval, charitable foundations that served both public image and private purposes. It was during the third hour that the real business began. "Moretti has been moving against our interests in Milan." The speaker was Domenico Ferrara, a silver-haired patriarch whose family had served the Riccis for 3 generations. His voice carried the weight of decades spent navigating these treacherous waters. "Define moving," Giovanna said. 3 of our shipping contracts have been redirected. The port authority suddenly discovered irregularities. Our people were detained, questioned, released without charges but without cargo. And Moretti's people happened to fill the void? Within hours. Giovanna's fingers traced the edge of the table. Ruggiero Moretti. A name that had haunted her reign since its beginning. Patient. Manipulative. Hungry for power he believed should have been his. What does he want? What he's always wanted. This came from Bruno Santini, the youngest council member, whose ambition was tempered by genuine loyalty. Your crown. Your territory. You. The last word hung in the air like poison. He's requested a meeting, Domenico continued. Neutral ground. To discuss mutual interests. Denied. With respect. Denied. Giovanna's voice didn't rise, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Moretti doesn't want discussion. He wants proximity. He wants to read me, to find weakness, to demonstrate that he can summon me at will. She stood and the council rose with her. Send him a message instead. The shipping contracts will be restored by week's end. The Port Authority officials will remember their proper loyalties. And if anything belonging to this family is redirected, again, I will personally ensure that Moretti's next shipment is his last. Silence. Then one by one the council members nodded their understanding. We have another matter, Chiara said from her position near the door. The man from the cafe. Giovanna turned slightly. Already. His name is Cristiano D'Angelo. 36. CEO of D'Angelo Holdings. Construction, luxury hospitality, import-export. Chiara's tablet glowed in the dim light. The legitimate face of a family that has maintained careful neutrality in our world for 4 generations. Neutrality. They pay tribute to no one. Make enemies of no one. Their business dealings are clean enough to withstand scrutiny, profitable enough to suggest they understand which palms to grease. Chiara hesitated. His father, Roberto D'Angelo, was once considered for a council seat. Before your mother declined to extend the invitation. Why did she decline? The records don't say. Giovanna moved to a window that overlooked the darkening hills. Somewhere out there, a man with warm green eyes and an easy smile was going about his evening, perhaps thinking of the mysterious woman who had disappeared into armored SUVs. What was he doing at that cafe? His company is renovating a resort 30 kilometers east. He's been making personal visits to the site. The cafe is on his regular route. So his presence was coincidence. It appears so. Chiara's voice carried careful neutrality. Though coincidences rarely serve those in our position. No. Giovanna turned from the window. They don't. 3 days later, Cristiano stood on the terrace of the half-finished resort, watching construction crews transform his vision into reality. The Albergo Stellato would be his masterpiece, a fusion of old Italian grandeur and modern luxury, perched on a mountainside that offered views stretching to the horizon. But his thoughts kept drifting to a woman in leather, amber eyes catching the light. He had spent those 3 days learning what he could about Giovanna Ricci. The information was frustratingly sparse. The Ricci family had controlled territory in Piedmont for generations, their influence extending through legitimate businesses and whispered networks of loyalty that stretched across Europe. Giovanna had assumed leadership 8 years ago following her mother's death and had promptly become a ghost. No photographs in society pages. No interviews. No public appearances at charity galas or industry conferences. She existed only in rumors. A shadow queen whose face was known to perhaps 50 people in the world. And Cristiano had flirted with her over coffee. You're smiling. He turned to find his site manager, a practical woman named Elena, watching him with raised eyebrows. Am I? Like a man who's seen something he can't quite believe. Elena handed him a tablet showing construction schedules. The foundation work is ahead of schedule. We should have the main structure weatherproofed before the autumn rains. Cristiano reviewed the numbers automatically, his mind elsewhere. Elena, what do you know about the Ricci family? Her expression shuddered instantly. Nothing I'd care to discuss. That's an answer in itself. It's the only answer you'll get from anyone with sense, Signore D'Angelo. Elena took the tablet back. Your father built this company by knowing which questions not to ask. Perhaps you should do the same. She walked away before he could respond. That evening, Cristiano found himself driving the mountain roads again. Not toward the resort. Toward the cafe where everything had changed. He told himself it was the espresso. He told himself it was the view. He told himself the route was simply convenient. But when he arrived at Café Montagna and saw a familiar black Ducati parked among the other motorcycles, his heart began to pound like a warning drum. Giovanna had known he would come. She had chosen this café for exactly this reason, though she would not have admitted it under torture. The analytical part of her mind, the part that had kept her alive through 8 years of enemies and ambitions, insisted this was reconnaissance. She needed to understand why a D'Angelo had appeared in her path. Whether he was a threat. Whether his presence was truly coincidental. The rest of her, the part she rarely acknowledged, simply wanted to see those green eyes again. She watched him enter, 6 feet 3 inches of confident Italian masculinity wrapped in a leather jacket and jeans. He moved through the café like a man who expected the world to arrange itself to his liking, not from arrogance but from genuine ease. When he saw her sitting in a corner booth, he stopped. Then he smiled. "You came back," Giovanna said as he approached. "I was in the area." "No, you weren't." Cristiano slid into the seat across from her. The booth was small enough that their knees nearly touched beneath the table. "Perhaps I hoped I'd find a beautiful woman who disappeared before I learned her name." "You know my name now." "I know a name. Names are not the same as knowing someone." The espresso machine hissed in the background. Other patrons maintained careful distance from their booth. Whether by coincidence or instruction, Giovanna wasn't certain. "What do you want, Cristiano D'Angelo?" "I want to know why you came back." He leaned forward slightly and his cologne reached her, something warm and woodsy, unexpectedly subtle. "You're the most powerful woman in Italy, possibly Europe. You don't stop at roadside cafes for the coffee. How do you know what I do?" "I don't. That's rather the point." His smile softened. "Everything I've learned about you amounts to whispers and shadows. No photographs. No interviews. You're a ghost who commands armies. And yet here I am. Having coffee. Here you are." They studied each other across the worn wooden table. Giovanna had faced down rivals who would have torn her empire apart without flinching. She had negotiated with criminals and politicians, had ordered actions that had ended lives and saved others. She had built walls around herself so high that even her closest advisors rarely glimpsed the woman behind the crown. But this man, with his easy charm and unguarded eyes, made her feel something she had almost forgotten existed. Curiosity about something other than survival. "You're not afraid of me," she observed. "Should I be? Most people are." "I'm not most people." "No." Giovanna turned her espresso cup in circles, a nervous habit she normally controlled. "You're not." They talked until the sun finished its descent and stars began to appear over the mountains. Not about power or politics. Not about families or obligations. Cristiano told her about his resort. His vision for a place where beauty and comfort merged with the landscape rather than conquering it. Giovanna spoke of her motorcycle journeys, the freedom she found on empty roads where no one knew her face. "You could ride forever," he said at one point. "Just disappear into the distance. And abandon everything I've built? Everyone who depends on me. Is that the only reason you stay?" The question struck deeper than he could have known. Giovanna had asked herself the same thing during long nights when the weight of her crown felt unbearable. "Power is a prison with gilded bars," she said finally. "You cannot leave without destroying everyone inside with you." "That sounds like something a prisoner would say." "Perhaps I am one." She met his eyes directly. "Perhaps we all are, trapped by our choices and the expectations others place upon us." "Then what's the key?" "I haven't found it yet." The cafe owner approached, looking nervous about interrupting. "We're closing, signora. If you need anything else." Giovanna rose and Cristiano rose with her. Outside, the mountain air had turned crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. "I should return," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the darkness beyond the parking lot. "Will I see you again?" "Do you want to?" "More than I should probably admit." Giovanna pulled on her riding gloves, leather creaking softly. "You don't know me. The real me. Then show me." "You don't know what you're asking." "I'm asking to see past the shadows." He stepped closer and she didn't step back. "I'm asking to know the woman who laughs at pickup lines and rides a Ducati and drinks espresso like it's medicine for her soul. That woman doesn't exist in my world." "Then let me show you mine." Across the mountains in a villa of modern glass and ancient stone, Ruggiero Moretti studied photographs spread across his desk. The images were grainy, taken from distance with telephoto lenses, but they showed what he needed to see. Giovanna Ricci, the untouchable queen, sitting in a common cafe with a common man. Who is he?
The operative standing before him shifted nervously. Cristiano D'Angelo. Construction. Hotels. Clean business from what we can tell. No one is clean. Moretti's finger traced Giovanna's face in the photograph. Find the dirt, and find out why our queen is suddenly interested in civilian company. Yes, sir. One more thing. Moretti's smile was a blade in human form. The D'Angelo family has remained neutral for generations. Perhaps it's time they chose a side. 1 week later, Cristiano stood in the private gallery of his mother's estate, surrounded by paintings that had been in his family for centuries. You're distracted, Isabella D'Angelo observed. At 62, she maintained the sharp elegance that had made her legendary in Milan's social circles. You've been distracted since your last trip to the mountains. I met someone. Someone. Isabella's perfectly shaped eyebrow rose. You meet many someones. None of them have ever made you miss dinner 3 times in a row. Cristiano turned from a Renaissance portrait, whose subject seemed to watch with knowing eyes. What do you know about the Ricci family? The temperature in the gallery seemed to drop. That's not a question for polite conversation. I'm not being polite. I'm asking. Isabella set down her wine glass with careful precision. Your father spent his entire career navigating around that question. He built this company by understanding that certain boundaries exist for reasons. What reasons? Survival. Cristiano had heard his mother use that tone perhaps 3 times in his life. Each time had preceded revelations that reshaped his understanding of his family. Tell me, he said. Isabella moved to the window, her silhouette framed against the evening light. The D'Angelo family has always walked a careful line. We are close enough to certain powers to understand their world, far enough to maintain our independence.
She paused.
Your grandfather made that choice deliberately. He saw what happened to families who entangled themselves too deeply. Wealth without freedom is just a decorated cage. And the Riccis? They are the power we walk carefully around. Isabella turned to face him. Adriana Ricci, Giovanna's mother, approached your father once. She wanted to bring us into her circle, not as subjects but as partners. She saw value in our legitimacy, our connections to worlds she couldn't access directly. What happened? Your father declined. Politely, of course. One does not refuse a Ricci rudely. But he understood that partnership with such power is never equal. Sooner or later, they own you. Cristiano thought of amber eyes and motorcycle exhaust, and conversations that made him feel more alive than he had in years. And if one of us became personally involved with a Ricci? Isabella's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to read. Is that what this is about? Giovanna Ricci. How did you know? Because there are only 2 Riccis who matter, and Luciana is 70 years old. Isabella's voice hardened. Cristiano, whatever you think you feel. I'm not thinking, mother. That's rather the problem. Then start thinking. She crossed the gallery with sudden urgency, gripping his arm. Giovanna Ricci is not a woman you date. She is not a woman you charm and bring home to Sunday dinners. She is the head of an organization that stretches across continents. People have died for looking at her wrong. She's also a person, under all that power. And you've known her how long? A few conversations. Long enough to know I want more. Isabella released his arm, stepping back with something like despair in her eyes. Your father protected you from this world. He kept you clean so you would have choices he never had. And now you're walking directly into the fire. Maybe I am. Cristiano's jaw set with determination. But I'm walking with my eyes open. That evening, Giovanna received a message that made her heartbeat stutter. Cristiano D'Angelo had requested a meeting. Not with the queen. With the woman. The message was delivered through legitimate business channels, an inquiry about partnership opportunities for his resort, requesting a personal meeting with the head of Ricci Development Corporation. The corporate facade was thin, but served its purpose. He wanted to see her. And God help her, she wanted to see him too. This is inadvisable, Chiara said, reading the message over her shoulder. Noted. If Moretti learns you're meeting with outsiders, especially someone whose family has always maintained distance, then we ensure Moretti doesn't learn. Giovanna turned from her desk. Arrange the meeting. My private offices in Turin. Tomorrow afternoon. You're certain? When have I ever been uncertain? Chiara's silence spoke volumes. The following afternoon, Cristiano D'Angelo walked into the headquarters of Ricci Development Corporation, a sleek tower of glass and steel that dominated Turin's skyline. The receptionist greeted him with professional warmth and directed him to a private elevator. He rode alone to the penthouse level, where the doors opened onto a world of restrained luxury. Marble floors. Abstract art that probably cost more than his first apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a god's-eye view of the city below. And there, silhouetted against the light, was Giovanna Ricci. She wore a charcoal suit tailored to perfection, her raven hair pulled back in an elegant twist. The leather jacket was gone, but the woman beneath remained, confident, compelling, unreachable. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for seeing me."
Please, sit.
They took positions on opposing sofas, a glass coffee table maintaining proper distance. A tray held espresso cups and biscotti that neither touched. "You mentioned partnership opportunities," Giovanna began. "I mentioned a reason to see you again. There are safer ways." "I'm not interested in safe." Something flickered across her features. Amusement, perhaps, or its dangerous cousin. "Tell me about your resort," she said. "The real vision, not the investment pitch." Cristiano spoke for 20 minutes. Not about profit margins or market positioning, but about craftsmanship and legacy. About his grandfather, who had started as a stonemason and ended as a builder of dreams. About his father, who had expanded their empire while never forgetting that construction was an act of creation, not just commerce. About his own determination to build something that would outlast him, something beautiful and true. Giovanna listened without interruption. When he finished, she rose and walked to the window. "My mother built this tower," she said, gesturing at the city below. 42 stories of glass and steel, the tallest building in the city at the time. People said it couldn't be done. The ground was wrong. The financing was impossible. The politics would never allow it. She paused. She built it anyway. What happened to her? She died. The words carried weight beyond mere fact. 8 years ago. Some deaths are natural. Some are encouraged. Cristiano understood the implication. You took her place. I was not given a choice. There's always a choice. Giovanna turned to face him directly. In the afternoon light, her amber eyes held depths he couldn't fathom. My mother was murdered by people who wanted our power. My father had died years before. My grandmother was too old to rebuild what was lost. If I had walked away, if I had refused the crown. She shook her head. Thousands of families depend on our organization. Not criminals, though yes, some exist within our world. Workers, business owners, communities that we protect when the law cannot or will not. You make it sound noble. I make it sound complicated. Because it is. She moved closer, until they were separated by merely feet. The world you know, legitimate business, corporate meetings, contracts, and negotiations, exists on top of an older world. One where power is not given but taken, where loyalty must be earned with blood, where a woman like me cannot show weakness even for a moment. And where does that leave room for you? Not the queen. You. The question hung between them. I don't know, Giovanna admitted. I haven't known for years. Cristiano reached out, slowly, giving her time to retreat. When she didn't, his hand found hers. Her skin was warm, her fingers calloused in surprising places, perhaps from the motorcycle, perhaps from other activities he couldn't imagine. Then let me help you remember. They dined that evening in a private restaurant owned by the Ricci family, a basement establishment that appeared on no directories, where discretion was absolute and the food was legendary. For 4 hours they talked. Really talked. Giovanna spoke of her childhood, the strange dual education of private tutors and family traditions. Cristiano described boarding schools where his father's name opened doors but couldn't protect him from boyhood cruelties. They discovered shared tastes in literature, opposing opinions on art, mutual appreciation for old motorcycles and older wine. "I haven't done this in years," Giovanna admitted over dessert. "Done what?"
Talked.
"Actually talked to someone who wasn't reporting to me or asking for something." "What do you think I'm asking for?" "I don't know yet." Her smile was softer than he had seen it. "That's what frightens me." When the evening ended, Chiara was waiting outside with a vehicle. Giovanna's brief scowl at her chief strategist suggested the intrusion was unexpected. "We need to leave," Chiara said, her voice tight with urgency.
Now.
"What's happened?" "Moretti. He's made his move." Across Turin, fire was consuming a warehouse that had stood for 60 years. Inside, according to Chiara's rapid report, 17 men loyal to the Ricci family had been conducting business. Legitimate business, processing shipments of olive oil destined for export. All 17 were now dead or missing. Giovanna's transformation was instantaneous. The woman who had laughed over wine vanished, replaced by something colder and infinitely more dangerous. "Get him home," she ordered Chiara, gesturing at Cristiano. "Safely. Discreetly." "Wait," Cristiano began. "This is not your world." Her voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "If you're seen near me tonight, you become a target. Go home, Cristiano. Forget this evening happened. And if I don't want to forget, then you're a fool." She was in the vehicle and gone before he could respond, leaving him standing on a dark street as sirens wailed in the distance. 1 week passed. The longest week of Cristiano's life. He watched the news obsessively. A warehouse fire in Turin, suspected arson, casualties unconfirmed. No mention of the Ricci family. No mention of Moretti. The official story was a gas leak, an accident, a tragedy. He knew it was war. His calls to Giovanna went unanswered. His messages vanished into silence. When he drove to the cafe in the mountains, it was closed, permanently, according to the sign on the door. Finally, in desperation, he reached out through the only channel he had left. He called his mother. "You need to tell me everything," he said. "About our family. About the Riccis. About whatever history you've been protecting me from." Isabella D'Angelo was silent for a long moment. "Come home," she said finally. "There are things you need to see." The documents were kept in a vault beneath the family estate, a room Cristiano had never known existed. His mother led him down stone stairs that smelled of age and secrets, through a door that required both key and combination. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls. Ledgers that dated back generations. Photographs, letters, contracts. "Your great-grandfather," Isabella began, "did not build this company from nothing. He built it with help." "What kind of help?" She pulled a photograph from one of the cabinets. It showed 2 men standing before a construction site, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling like brothers. "That's Enzo D'Angelo," Isabella said, pointing to one man. "Your great-grandfather. And that," she pointed to the other, "is Vittorio Ricci, Giovanna's great-grandfather." Cristiano's blood went cold. They were partners. Not just business partners. Family, practically. Enzo helped Vittorio establish certain distribution networks. Vittorio protected Enzo's construction crews from interference. For 30 years, they built empires side by side. What happened? Vittorio died. His son was less interested in partnership, more interested in control. He demanded that the D'Angelos submit to Ricci authority. Isabella's voice hardened. Your grandfather refused. He understood that submission was never truly partnership. He pulled away, carefully over the course of a decade. Built walls between our families. Made us neutral. But we have history. History that most people have forgotten. Isabella met his eyes. History that Giovanna Ricci certainly knows, because her grandmother would have told her. The implications crashed over Cristiano like a wave.
She knew who I was.
From the beginning. Probably. Then our meeting was either coincidence or calculation. With a Ricci, both are possible. Cristiano sat heavily on a dusty chair. The documents surrounded him like accusations. "There's more," his mother said gently. "More?" She handed him a letter, yellowed with age, bearing his grandfather's handwriting. "To whoever reads this, our family walks a narrow path. We are not innocent. No fortune built in this country is truly clean. But we have maintained our freedom by maintaining our distance. The Ricci's will always circle back to us. Our blood is mingled with their history, even if the world has forgotten. Whoever leads this family must remember, they are not our enemies. They are not our friends. They are the tide, and we must learn to sail accordingly." "Your grandfather wrote that the year before he died," Isabella said. "I think he knew, even then, that someday we would face this choice again." That night, Cristiano sat alone on the terrace of his apartment, watching the lights of Turin spread below like scattered diamonds. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "I told you to forget." Giovanna's voice was exhausted, frayed in ways he hadn't heard before. "I couldn't. You need to. For your own protection. I found the letters. The photographs. I know about Enzo and Vittorio." Silence stretched across the connection. "My grandmother told me about your family," Giovanna finally said. "When I was 16, she showed me the old photographs, explained how closely we were once connected." "Did you know who I was?" "At the cafe?" "Not at first." Her laugh was hollow. "Isn't that ridiculous? The great queen, master of intelligence networks, and I didn't recognize you until Chiara ran your plates. But by then what? By then it was too late." "Too late for what?" "Too late to pretend I didn't want to know you." Cristiano gripped the phone like a lifeline. "Where are you?" "That doesn't matter." "It matters to me. Moretti is moving against everyone close to me. Everyone I've shown any connection to. If he learns about you, then tell me where you are, and we'll face him together." "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Cristiano stood, suddenly certain of his path. "My family spent 3 generations walking a line between your world and mine. Careful, neutral, safe."
He paused.
"I'm tired of being safe. Cristiano, tell me where you are." The longest pause of his life. Then she gave him an address. The safe house was hidden in the hills above Lake Maggiore, a villa that appeared abandoned from the road but hummed with quiet activity within. Guards materialized from shadows as Cristiano's car approached, waving him through only after verification that took far too long for his racing heart. Giovanna met him at the door. She looked different, thinner. Shadows beneath her amber eyes spoke of sleepless nights. But when she saw him, something in her expression softened. "You shouldn't have come. Where else would I be?" She led him inside, through rooms where armed men and women nodded respectfully, but kept their hands near their weapons. They climbed to a second-floor study that overlooked the lake, where moonlight painted the water in silver. "Moretti has declared open war," Giovanna said, closing the door. "The warehouse was just the beginning. He's targeting businesses, distribution centers, anyone loyal to my family." "What does he want?" "What men like him always want."
Power. Control. Me.
Her jaw tightened. "He believes that if he can destroy enough of what I've built, I'll submit to an alliance. Marriage, actually, though he calls it partnership." "And will you?" Giovanna's look could have frozen fire. "I would rather burn my empire to the ground than hand it to a man like Ruggiero Moretti." "Then don't." "It's not that simple." "It is." Cristiano moved closer, until he could see the exhaustion etched in every line of her face. "You're not alone. You have loyal people. You have resources. You have the fear and respect of everyone in this world. Fear and respect won't stop bullets."
No.
"But they might slow them down long enough to find another way." Giovanna searched his face, looking for something he couldn't identify. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Really? You have a company to run. A safe life to return to. You owe me nothing." "I'm here because—" Cristiano struggled for words adequate to the truth. "Because when I met you at that cafe, something changed. I can't explain it. I can't justify it. But from that moment, walking away stopped being possible. You barely know me. Then let me know you better. His hand found her face, cupping her cheek with gentleness that felt foreign in this room full of weapons and war. Giovanna's eyes fluttered closed, and for one moment, she leaned into his touch. Then she pulled away. If Moretti learns you're here, you become leverage. A hostage. A way to control me. I can protect myself. You can't protect yourself from what's coming. She moved to the window, putting distance between them. Tomorrow, I meet with the council. We'll decide our response to Moretti's aggression. It will likely mean open conflict, the kind that makes headlines even when we try to keep things quiet. What can I do? Go home. Be safe. Forget you ever met a woman in a roadside cafe. You know I won't do that. Giovanna turned, and for the first time, he saw tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. Then God help us both. The meeting with Luciana Ricci took place at dawn. Giovanna's grandmother received Cristiano in a sunroom overlooking the lake, her silver hair perfectly arranged despite the early hour. She wore a black dress that had probably been elegant 50 years ago, and remained so, through sheer force of will. So, Luciana said, studying him with eyes that missed nothing. You're the D'Angelo who's turned my granddaughter's head. With respect, Signora, I don't think anyone can turn your granddaughter's head. A ghost of a smile crossed Luciana's face. You're correct. She inherited that stubbornness from me. She gestured to a chair. Sit. We should talk while we have the chance. Cristiano sat. Your great-grandfather was my late husband's closest friend, Luciana began. Did you know that? Not merely business partner. Friend. Brother, really. They built everything you see, the legitimate companies, the hidden networks, together. My mother showed me the photographs. Photographs. Luciana waved dismissively. Photographs capture moments. I'm talking about decades. I was there, you know. A young bride watching my husband and Enzo D'Angelo dream the most dangerous dreams. Her eyes grew distant. They believed they could create something new. A criminal empire with rules, codes of honor, protection for innocence, punishment for those who deserved it. What went wrong? The next generation. Luciana's voice hardened. My husband died. Enzo's son wanted independence, not partnership. The alliance fractured. By the time Giovanna's mother took power, the D'Angelo family had been neutral for so long that most had forgotten we were ever anything else. But you remembered. I remember everything. The old woman leaned forward, suddenly intense. I watched Giovanna grow from a child who laughed too loudly into a woman who barely smiles. I watched her take a crown she never wanted, bear a burden she never asked for, become someone her enemies fear and her allies worship. Her hand trembled as she reached for her tea. And then I watched her speak of a man at a roadside cafe, and I saw something I thought I'd never see again. What? Hope. The word hung between them. She won't admit it, Luciana continued. She's too proud. Too afraid. She's been taught that love is weakness, that attachment is vulnerability, that the only thing she can trust is power. The old woman's eyes fixed on Cristiano with penetrating force. But I saw her face when she talked about you. I heard how her voice changed. For the first time in 8 years, she sounded like the girl I used to know. I would never hurt her.
No.
But your presence in her life makes her vulnerable. Makes her a target for men like Moretti, who will use any weapon to bring her down. Luciana rose, moving to the window with surprising grace. The question is whether that vulnerability is worth the risk. It is, Cristiano said without hesitation. You answer quickly. Because I don't need time to think about it. Luciana turned, and her smile was the most genuine he had seen. Then perhaps, she said, you are exactly what this family needs. The council meeting convened at noon. Cristiano watched from an observation room, a concession Giovanna had reluctantly granted, though she insisted he remain hidden from the council members themselves. 12 men and women sat around the same ebony table he had seen in Giovanna's description. They wore the faces of bankers and business people, but their eyes held the hardness of soldiers. Giovanna presided at the head, transformed once again into the Black Queen. No trace of the woman who had leaned into his touch remained. "We have two options," she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "We can match Moretti's aggression, striking at his holdings with equal or greater force. This will escalate the conflict and likely result in significant casualties on both sides. Or," Domenico Ferrara asked, "or we find another way." "What other way?" Bruno Santini leaned forward, his young face eager. "He's attacked us. Killed our people. There is no negotiation possible with such a man." "I'm not suggesting negotiation." Giovanna's smile was sharp enough to cut. "I'm suggesting we attack something he values more than territory. His pride. His legitimacy." Silence fell over the council. "Moretti's power rests on a foundation of perceived strength," Giovanna continued. "He's convinced the other families that he can challenge me successfully. That my leadership is weak, my alliance is crumbling." She stood, moving to a screen on the wall. "What if we proved him wrong without firing a single shot?"
How?
"By demonstrating that his own house is made of glass." For the next hour, Giovanna laid out a plan of elegant brutality. Not violence, but exposure. Moretti's operations depended on a network of corrupt officials, compromised businesses, and hidden accounts. What if those secrets suddenly became public? What if the authorities, properly motivated of course, suddenly discovered evidence of crimes even Moretti's influence couldn't suppress? "You're talking about destroying him legally?" Chiara asked, incredulous. "I'm talking about giving his enemies the weapons they need to destroy him themselves." Giovanna's amber eyes gleamed. "Moretti has spent decades making enemies. Politicians he's blackmailed. Businesses he's extorted. Families he's wronged. They've been too afraid to move against him because they believed he was protected." She paused. "What happens when that protection disappears?" "They tear him apart," Domenico said slowly. "From the inside. And we don't lift a finger. Our hands stay clean. Our reputation remains intact." Giovanna looked around the table. "When the dust settles, Moretti is gone, and we've demonstrated that crossing the Ricci family is not just dangerous, it's fatal. Without ever shedding a drop of blood ourselves." The vote was unanimous. 3 weeks later, Ruggiero Moretti's empire began to crumble. It started with a newspaper investigation, funded, though the journalists would never know it, by Ricci money. Evidence of tax fraud emerged. Then money laundering. Then connections to human trafficking that even Moretti's carefully cultivated image couldn't survive. Politicians who had protected him suddenly developed conscience. Business partners discovered urgent reasons to terminate contracts. His own people, sensing the changing tide, began to whisper about exit strategies. Cristiano watched it unfold from a distance, increasingly aware that the woman he was falling for commanded a chess game played across continents. They continued to meet, carefully, always in secure locations. Sometimes for hours, sometimes for stolen minutes. Each encounter deepened something between them, something neither could fully name, but both felt in their bones. "You're afraid of me," Giovanna said one evening, as they walked the grounds of another safe house.
No.
"Then you're afraid of what I represent." "Also no." "Then what?" Cristiano stopped, turning to face her in the fading light. "I'm afraid of what happens when this ends. When Moretti is gone and your empire is secure and you don't need whatever this is anymore." "You think I'm using you?" "I think you've been fighting alone for so long that you've forgotten how to do anything else. And I'm afraid that when the battle is won, you'll retreat behind your walls again and forget that there's someone on the outside who wants to be let in." Giovanna's expression shifted through emotions too complex to read. "I've never let anyone in," she admitted. "Not since my mother died. It's not that I don't want to. It's that every time I've tried, people have used it against me." "I'm not people."
No.
"You're not." She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "That's what terrifies me most." But their fragile peace was not to last. 3 days later, Cristiano's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. When he answered, his blood went cold. "Signore D'Angelo." Ruggiero Moretti's voice was smooth, almost pleasant. "I believe we should talk." "How did you get this number?" "I have many resources." Fewer every day, thanks to your friend, but enough remaining for important tasks. What do you want? I want you to understand something. Moretti's voice hardened. Giovanna Ricci has destroyed everything I've built. My reputation, my alliances, my legacy. And she did it because of you. I had nothing to do with. You gave her hope. The words dripped with contempt. Hope made her reckless. Made her believe she could fight me without consequences. And now she will learn what consequences truly mean. The line went dead. Cristiano immediately dialed Giovanna's secure number. It rang.
And rang. And rang.
No answer. For hours later, Cristiano stood in the command center of the safe house, watching screens fill with horrifying information. Giovanna was missing. Her convoy had been ambushed on a mountain road, the same mountains where they had first met. Chiara Bellini was injured but alive. 3 guards were dead. 2 were missing alongside their queen.
How?
Cristiano demanded. How did he know her route? Traitor. Chiara's voice was ragged, her arm in a sling. Someone on the council. Has to be.
Who?
I don't know. Chiara's eyes blazed with fury and something else, fear. But when I find them, focus on finding her. We're trying. Every asset, every contact, every favor we've ever earned. Try harder. Chiara looked at him with new appraisal. You love her. It wasn't a question. Yes, Cristiano said. I do. Then help us. Your family has contacts in worlds we can't reach. Legitimate businesses, government connections, law enforcement networks. Chiara gripped his arm with her uninjured hand. If you really love her, then use everything you have to find her. Because Moretti won't keep her alive forever. The following 48 hours were the longest of Cristiano's life. He reached out to every contact his family possessed. Called in favors his father had accumulated over decades. Leveraged relationships with police officials, politicians, business leaders. Anyone who might have access to information the Ricci network couldn't reach. Slowly, the picture came together. Moretti had taken Giovanna to a compound in the Swiss Alps, a fortress he'd maintained for decades as a bolt hole for exactly this type of situation. The location was heavily defended. Traditional assault would be suicide. But Cristiano had learned something during those weeks of watching Giovanna dismantle her enemy. There was always another way. 24 hours before the rescue operation launched, Chiara found Cristiano in the communications room, surrounded by maps and documents. You're planning something, she said. Yes. Something stupid. Probably. Something that will get you killed. Possibly. Chiara sat down heavily. Tell me. Cristiano laid out his plan. Not an assault. Not a negotiation. Something in between. Moretti wants legitimacy, Cristiano explained. He's spent his whole life trying to be respected by the straight world, the business world, the world where my family has operated for generations. That's why this destruction has hurt him so badly. Not the money, not the territory, but the respect he's lost. So I offer him something he can't resist. A path back to respectability. A partnership with D'Angelo Holdings that would restore his reputation, give him access to legitimate channels, make him untouchable again. You'd partner with the man who kidnapped the woman you love? I'd pretend to. Cristiano's smile was thin and dangerous. Long enough to get inside his compound. Long enough to find out exactly where he's keeping her. Long enough for your people to plan an approach that won't get everyone killed. Chiara studied him for a long moment. You're not what I expected, she finally said. What did you expect? Another soft businessman playing at being dangerous. Instead, you're just stupid enough to be useful. She stood, extending her uninjured hand. Welcome to the family, D'Angelo. Let's go save our queen. The message went out the following morning. Cristiano D'Angelo, understanding that business was business, requested a meeting with Ruggiero Moretti to discuss mutually beneficial opportunities. Moretti, desperate for any lifeline, agreed immediately. The meeting was set for the following day, at Moretti's compound, in Switzerland, where Giovanna Ricci waited in chains, not knowing that the man she might have loved was walking into the lion's den to save her. And that's where we leave them. Cristiano driving toward danger, Giovanna imprisoned by a madman, and a war about to reach its violent conclusion. But what happens next will change everything. The night air outside the Palazzo della Ragione carried the chill of autumn's first true warning. Giovanna stood in the shadows of a private courtyard, her evening gown suddenly feeling like armor that had been breached. Chiara had followed her here, maintaining a careful distance while the other guards secured the perimeter. "Tell me," Giovanna said without turning. "Tell me everything you know about the Bellini massacre." The silence that followed was answer enough. "Gia. You're a Bellini, Chiara. The massacre that killed half your family. You've never told me the full story. I always assumed it was because the pain was too great." Giovanna finally turned, her amber eyes blazing in the darkness. "But that's not why, is it?" Chiara's face had gone pale. "It was before you were born." "That's not an answer." "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicated." Giovanna stepped closer. "Moretti just implied that Cristiano's grandfather was involved. That the D'Angelo family owes a debt connected to your family's deaths. If that's true, if there's any chance that's true, I need to know now." For a long moment, Chiara said nothing. Then she exhaled slowly. "My family controlled the shipping routes along the eastern coast in the 80s. Small operation, but strategic. Your grandfather wanted to expand, and he needed our cooperation. I know this part. What you don't know is that there was a third party involved. A legitimate businessman who served as an intermediary, someone who could move money and goods through official channels without raising suspicion." Giovanna's stomach tightened. "Marcello D'Angelo." "Yes." Chiara's voice was flat. "He worked with both sides, made promises to everyone. And when things went wrong, when certain deals fell apart, what happened? A meeting was arranged to resolve the disputes. Neutral territory. My father, my uncles, 3 of my cousins, they all went in good faith." Chiara's jaw tightened. "They never came out. And Marcello? He was supposed to be there. He was the one who arranged the meeting, guaranteed the safety of all parties." Chiara paused. "He never showed up. Claimed his car broke down on the way. By the time he arrived, everyone was dead and the killers were gone." "You think he set them up?" "I think he knew what was going to happen and chose not to warn anyone." Chiara met Giovanna's eyes. "But I could never prove it. No one could. And after the massacre, the Bellini family was too weak to pursue justice. We survived by pledging loyalty to your grandfather, the very man who had the most to gain from our destruction." The weight of this revelation pressed down on Giovanna like a physical force. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because it was ancient history. Because Marcello D'Angelo died 15 years ago, and whatever debts he owed went with him." Chiara stepped closer. "Because I never imagined his grandson would walk into your life and complicate everything." "You think Cristiano knows?" "I don't know what he knows." Chiara's expression hardened. "But I know what Moretti is doing. He's using this to drive a wedge between you, to make you question everyone around you until you have no one left. And if the information is accurate, then you'll have to make a choice." Chiara paused. "But don't make it tonight. Not based on accusations from a man who would say anything to destabilize your position." Giovanna looked up at the stars, barely visible through the light pollution of the city. 24 hours ago, her life had seemed almost manageable. She had a growing connection with a man who made her feel human. She had a plan to address the council's concerns in her own time. She had believed, perhaps naively, that she could navigate the treacherous waters of Mafia politics while still preserving something for herself. Now, everything was chaos. "Where is he?" she asked quietly. "D'Angelo?" "Still inside. My people have been watching him." "Bring him to me." "Gia. I need to hear his side." Giovanna's voice was steel. "I need to look in his eyes when I ask him about his grandfather. And then I'll decide what to do." Chiara hesitated for only a moment. Then she nodded and disappeared into the shadows. Cristiano emerged into the courtyard 5 minutes later, his expression shifting from concern to wariness as he took in the armed guards stationed at every exit. "Giovanna?" He moved toward her. "What's happening? 1 minute you were handling business, the next." Tell me about your grandfather. The words stopped him cold. My grandfather? Marcello D'Angelo. Giovanna watched his face carefully, searching for any flicker of deception. Tell me about his business dealings in the 1980s. Tell me about his connections to the families. Cristiano's expression shifted through several emotions, confusion, then understanding, then something that looked almost like resignation. Moretti told you. Moretti told me many things. Now I want to hear the truth from you. For a long moment he was silent. Then he walked to a stone bench at the edge of the courtyard and sat down heavily. I found out about my grandfather's past when I was 23, he said quietly. My father had just died, and I was going through his papers, trying to understand the business I was inheriting. I found letters, records, things that should have been destroyed decades ago. What kind of things? Correspondence with people whose names I recognized from newspapers, not the business sections but the crime reports. Ledgers that showed payments to companies that didn't seem to exist. And a file labeled Bellini that contained. He paused. Photographs of a meeting that ended badly. Giovanna felt ice forming in her veins. You knew about the massacre. I knew my grandfather was involved in something terrible. Cristiano looked up at her. I didn't know the details. I didn't want to know. I burned everything I found and spent the next 10 years trying to build something clean, something that would wash away whatever sins my family had committed. And you never thought to mention this? When you realized who I was, what world I belonged to. I didn't know you were connected to the Bellinis. His voice cracked slightly. I didn't know any of this until about 15 minutes ago, when your advisor started interrogating me about family history I've spent my entire adult life trying to forget. Giovanna stared at him. You're telling me this is all coincidence? That you just happened to approach the one woman in Italy whose closest advisor has every reason to want your family destroyed? I'm telling you that I walked into a cafe and saw a beautiful woman on a motorcycle, and I didn't think about anything except wanting to talk to her. He stood, moving toward her. I'm telling you that whatever my grandfather did, whatever sins he committed, I am not him. I've never been him. And I have spent my entire life trying to prove that the D'Angelo name doesn't have to mean what it used to mean. That's a convenient story. It's the truth. He was close now, close enough that she could see the pain in his green eyes. Giovanna, I know how this looks. I know Moretti is using this to hurt you. And I know I have no way to prove my innocence. But I am asking you, begging you, to believe that I would never intentionally harm you or anyone connected to you. Belief isn't something I can afford. Then what do you need? He spread his hands. Documents? Testimony? I'll give you access to everything. Every file, every record, every piece of paper my family ever produced. Search my homes, my offices, my entire life. If there's any evidence that I've been deceiving you, find it. Giovanna studied his face. She had been trained from childhood to detect lies, to recognize the micro-expressions that betrayed hidden intentions, the subtle inconsistencies that revealed deception. She had interrogated men who had seemed entirely sincere right up until the moment their treachery was exposed. And yet, looking at Cristiano D'Angelo, she saw nothing but desperate honesty, which either meant he was telling the truth, or he was the most accomplished liar she had ever encountered. Chiara, she said without looking away from him. Take a team to his Milan office. Begin the search tonight. Gia, it's nearly midnight. I don't care what time it is. Giovanna's voice was flat. I want answers, and I want them before sunrise. Chiara exchanged a glance with one of the guards, then nodded. And him. Giovanna looked at Cristiano for a long moment. He stays with me. Cristiano's eyebrows rose slightly. Is that wise? Chiara asked. Probably not. Giovanna's expression was unreadable. But I'm not letting him out of my sight until I know whether he's telling the truth. She turned and walked toward a private entrance at the far side of the courtyard. Come with me, she said over her shoulder. We have a long night ahead. The safe house was located in the hills above Verona, an ancient villa that had been in the Ricci family for generations, its modern security systems hidden behind Renaissance-era architecture. Giovanna led Cristiano through corridors lined with priceless artwork, past guards who watched with undisguised suspicion, and into a private study where a fire was already burning in an enormous stone fireplace. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a leather chair near the flames. He sat. She poured 2 glasses of wine from a decanter on the sideboard, handed one to him, and settled into the chair opposite. For several minutes, neither spoke. The fire crackled. Outside, wind moved through cypress trees. "When my father died," Giovanna finally said, "I spent the first week convinced it was my fault. That if I had been smarter, faster, more aware, I could have seen the threat coming and stopped it." Cristiano said nothing, but his eyes were fixed on her face. "It took me a long time to understand that some things are beyond our control, that we can't be responsible for every tragedy that touches our lives." She took a sip of wine. "What I'm trying to figure out right now is whether you're a tragedy that's touching my life, or something else entirely. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me something that proves I can trust you." Her amber eyes met his. "Something that Moretti couldn't have scripted. Something that shows me who you really are." Cristiano was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his wine glass. "When I was 25, he said slowly, "I discovered that one of my father's business partners had been embezzling from the company for years. Millions of euros. The evidence was overwhelming." "What did you do?" "I confronted him privately. Gave him the choice to return what he had stolen and resign quietly, or face prosecution." Cristiano paused. "He chose a third option. He tried to have me killed." Giovanna's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "How did you survive?" "The men he hired weren't professionals, just local criminals looking for a payday. They made mistakes. I was lucky." He touched a spot on his left side, just below the ribs. "I spent 3 weeks in the hospital and another 6 months learning how to walk without pain." "And the business partner?" "He fled the country before I was out of the hospital. Died in a car accident in Argentina 2 years later." Cristiano met her eyes. "I don't know if the accident was arranged or genuinely accidental. And honestly, I've never wanted to know." Giovanna studied him. "You're telling me this because you want me to understand that you've been touched by violence too, that you know what it's like to be betrayed. I'm telling you this because you asked for truth." He leaned forward slightly. "That experience changed me. It made me understand that the world I inherited from my father and grandfather wasn't as clean as I wanted to believe. It made me obsessive about knowing exactly who I was dealing with in every business relationship. And yet you approached a stranger in a cafe without any knowledge of who she was. Because I wasn't looking for a business relationship." His voice softened. "I was looking for something real." The words hung in the air between them. Outside, a car engine approached the villa, then fell silent. Giovanna's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, read the message, and set it aside. "Chiara has reached her office," she said. "The search has begun."
Good.
Cristiano didn't look away from her face. "Let them find whatever they find. I have nothing to hide." "We'll see." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness beyond. "I want to believe you," she said quietly. "More than I've wanted to believe anything in years." "Then believe me. It's not that simple." She turned to face him. "I've built my entire position on being impossible to deceive, on seeing through every lie, every manipulation, every hidden agenda. If I'm wrong about you, if I've let my personal feelings compromise my judgment." "You haven't. How can you be sure?" "Because I know what I am." He stood and moved toward her. "I'm a man who's spent his whole life trying to be better than his history, trying to build something that matters, trying to prove that we're not defined by the sins of our ancestors." He stopped an arm's length away. "Sound familiar?" Giovanna's breath caught. "That's not fair." "Nothing about this is fair." He took another step closer. "But here we are, 2 people."
The mountain highway curved through northern Italy like a ribbon of black silk draped across ancient stone. Sunlight filtered through cypress trees, casting long shadows across the weathered parking lot of Café della Montagna, a roadside cafe that had witnessed 50 years of travelers, lovers, and secrets. A black Ducati Panigale V4 rolled to a stop beside 3 other motorcycles. The rider swung one leg over the seat with practiced grace. Gloved hands reached up. The helmet came off slowly. Long raven black hair tumbled free, catching the afternoon light like liquid obsidian. Every head in the outdoor seating area turned. She didn't notice. Or perhaps she simply didn't care. Inside the cafe, the owner's hands trembled as he reached for an espresso cup. 3 kilometers away, 3 black armored SUVs accelerated toward the mountain road. And a confident stranger with green eyes watched the mysterious woman walk toward the entrance, already composing his opening line. He had no idea that the next 5 minutes would change everything he thought he knew about power, danger, and love. Before we begin, thank you for spending part of your day with me. Whether you're listening from home, at work, on a road trip, or relaxing before bed, I'm truly grateful you're here. Tonight's story is filled with mystery, danger, unforgettable romance, and a woman whose true identity changes everything. Please like, share, and subscribe. And comment below where you're watching from so I can see just how far across the world this story has reached. Now let's begin today's unforgettable story. The afternoon sun hung low over the winding mountain highway of northern Italy, casting golden light across the weathered stone walls of Caffè Montagna. Motorcycles lined the gravel parking lot like sleeping predators, chrome catching fire in the dying light. Inside, espresso machines hissed their ancient songs while travelers paused between destinations. Then she arrived. A black Ducati Diavel growled up the mountain road, its engine a thunderous heartbeat against the silence. The rider dismounted with fluid grace, black leather jacket fitted perfectly to her athletic frame. When she removed her helmet, long raven hair tumbled over her shoulders like midnight silk. Every head turned. She walked inside as though she owned the mountain itself. At the bar, she ordered an espresso in a voice smooth as aged wine. Moments later, a confident stranger rose from his corner table. Broad-shouldered, green eyes sparkling with amusement. He approached with an easy smile that had opened countless doors. "That's a beautiful machine outside," he said. "Almost as striking as its rider." He smiled back, amused. "Does that line usually work?" Before he could answer, the cafe owner went pale. Outside, 3 black armored SUVs rolled into the parking lot. Armed men stepped out, their movements precise and military. Every biker instinctively lowered their eyes. The confident stranger laughed. Someone famous must have arrived. Then every armed guard walked past him, stopped in front of the woman, and bowed their heads. One quietly said, "Your Majesty, the meeting is ready." Only then did the stranger realize. The woman he'd been flirting with wasn't merely a biker. She was the Mafia queen every Don in Italy feared. Cristiano D'Angelo had built his reputation on reading people. At 36, he'd negotiated deals that would have crushed lesser men, navigated boardrooms filled with sharks, and charmed his way through the most exclusive circles of Italian society. His family's business empire, legitimate on paper, though whispers suggested deeper connections, had taught him that power wore many faces. He had never expected power to wear black leather and ride a Ducati. The woman, this queen who had laughed at his flirtation moments ago, turned to face him with those extraordinary amber eyes. In the golden afternoon light, they seemed to hold ancient secrets. "You seem surprised," she said, her voice carrying the same amused warmth from before. Cristiano found his balance. A lesser man might have stammered apologies. Instead, he inclined his head with genuine respect. "Only that I didn't recognize royalty when I saw her." Something flickered in her expression. Interest perhaps. Or curiosity. Most people don't. She glanced at the waiting guards, then back at him. "That's rather the point." Before Cristiano could respond, a woman emerged from the lead SUV. Dark pixie-cut hair. Sharp brown eyes that assessed him like a weapon evaluating a target. She wore a tailored black suit that did nothing to hide the lean muscle beneath. "We need to move," the woman said, her gaze never leaving Cristiano. "The council is waiting." The queen nodded once. She turned toward the door, then paused. Looking back over her shoulder, she offered Cristiano a smile that sent warmth spreading through his chest. "Perhaps we'll meet again," she said. "When you're not trying quite so hard." Then she was gone, swallowed by the waiting convoy. Cristiano stood in the suddenly silent cafe, his espresso growing cold on the bar beside him. The cafe owner, A weathered man named Giorgio, who had served these mountain travelers for 40 years, approached with trembling hands. "Do you know who that was?" Giorgio whispered. "No." Cristiano's eyes remained fixed on the empty doorway. "But I intend to find out." Giorgio made the sign of the cross. "La Regina Nera. The Black Queen. They say she commands more loyalty than the Pope and more fear than the devil himself." "Who is she?" "No one knows her face. No one outside her inner circle anyway." Giorgio lowered his voice further. "But her name, her real name, is Giovanna Ricci. And if she smiled at you, signore, you should either count yourself blessed or start running." Cristiano pulled several bills from his wallet, far more than his espresso cost. He set them on the bar and walked toward the door. "Which would you recommend?" he asked. Giorgio's answer followed him into the mountain air. "Both." Across northern Italy, in a fortress of stone and shadow that had witnessed centuries of power-changing hands, the council awaited their queen. The Palazzo Nero rose from the Piedmont hills like a sleeping giant. Its walls, blackened by age and legend, had sheltered Ricci family secrets since the Renaissance. Now, as evening painted the sky in shades of blood and gold, those walls welcomed home their most formidable heir.
Who've spent years constructing walls around themselves, suddenly faced with something that might actually matter. "We barely know each other. Then let's change that." He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and took her hand. "Let me prove to you that I'm worth trusting. Not tonight, I know that's not possible. But over time, through actions, through whatever tests you need to set. And if you fail those tests, then I'll accept the consequences." His green eyes held hers. "But I won't stop trying. And I won't give up on whatever this is between us." Giovanna looked at their joined hands. His fingers were warm around hers, steady and strong and surprisingly gentle. "You don't know what you're asking for," she whispered. "I know exactly what I'm asking for." His thumb traced a small circle on her palm. "I'm asking for a chance. Nothing more. Nothing less." She should pull away. She should end this before it went any further. She should. Her phone buzzed again. This time, the message made her go pale. "What is it?" Cristiano asked. Giovanna didn't answer immediately. She read the message twice, then 3 times, as if the words might change. "Chiara found something in your office," she said finally.
What?
"A file." Giovanna's voice was hollow, marked with the Ricci family crest, containing detailed information about our operations, our territory, our weaknesses, information that could only have come from inside my organization. Cristiano's face went blank with shock. "That's impossible. I've never." "It was hidden in a false bottom of your desk drawer." Giovanna stepped back, pulling her hand from his. "Explain that, Cristiano." "I can't explain it, because I didn't put it there." He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. "Someone planted it. Moretti. This has to be Moretti's doing." "Convenient." "It's the truth. The truth is that there's a file in your possession containing enough information to destroy me." Giovanna's expression had turned to stone. "The truth is that you appeared in my life at exactly the moment when I was most vulnerable to manipulation. The truth is that everything about this feels like a trap that I walked into with my eyes open." "Giovanna, please." "Guards." The door opened immediately. 2 men entered, their hands resting on their weapons. "Escort Senior D'Angelo to the secure room," Giovanna said flatly. "He's not to leave until I say otherwise." "You're imprisoning me?" "I'm protecting myself." She turned away from him. "Until I understand what's happening, you're a threat I can't afford to ignore." "Giovanna." "Don't." Her voice cracked slightly. "Don't say anything else. Not right now." The guards moved toward Cristiano. For a moment he looked like he might resist. Then his shoulders sagged. "I didn't do this," he said quietly. "Whatever that file contains, whoever put it there, it wasn't me. And when you figure that out, I hope you'll remember this moment." He allowed himself to be led away without another word. The door closed behind him. Giovanna stood alone in the study, staring at the flames. And for the first time since she had become the Black Queen, she felt tears burning in her eyes. The hours that followed were the longest of Giovanna's life. Chiara arrived at the villa near dawn. bringing with her the damning file and a preliminary report that raised more questions than it answered. They spread everything out on the study's massive desk: photographs, documents, handwritten notes, organizational charts. The depth of information was staggering: shipping routes, safe house locations, names of protected contacts, details of ongoing negotiations. "This is months of intelligence work," Kiara said grimly. "Maybe longer. Whoever compiled this has access to things that only a handful of people should know." And it was just sitting in D'Angelo's desk? Hidden, but not particularly well hidden. Kiara frowned, almost like someone wanted it to be found. "Moretti." "That's my assumption." Kiara pulled out a sheet of paper covered in her own handwriting. "I've had my people trace the documents. The paper stock, the printing, the binding, all of it can be sourced to suppliers we know Moretti uses." "So, he planted the file." "He planted something." Kiara hesitated. "But the information itself, Gia, some of this is accurate. Really accurate. There are details here that even I didn't know until I cross-referenced them with our internal records." Giovanna felt a chill run through her. Meaning either Moretti has a source inside our organization, or Cristiano is exactly what he appears to be, an innocent man being framed. Or both. Kiara met her eyes. Those aren't mutually exclusive possibilities. Giovanna sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. "Who has access to this level of information? Besides you and me? Maybe half a dozen people. The heads of our major operations. A few trusted lieutenants." Kiara paused. "And anyone they might have inadvertently shared information with. That's a lot of potential sources." Which is exactly the problem. Kiara gathered the documents back into the file. Moretti didn't need Cristiano to be guilty. He just needed you to believe he might be guilty long enough to fracture your trust. It worked. Did it? Kiara sat down across from her. "Because the Giovanna Ricci I know wouldn't imprison a man based on planted evidence. The Giovanna Ricci I know would dig deeper, find the real source, and use that information to destroy her enemies. The Giovanna Ricci, you know, wasn't falling for someone." The admission hung in the air between them. "So you admit it," Kiara said softly. "I admit nothing." But Giovanna's voice lacked conviction. "I admit that he makes me feel things I haven't felt in years. I admit that I want to believe him. And I admit that wanting to believe him is exactly what makes this situation so dangerous. Or exactly what makes it real." "Since when are you defending him?" "I'm not defending him." Kiara leaned back in her chair. "I'm pointing out that Moretti's entire strategy depends on isolating you, on making you doubt everyone around you until you have no one left to trust. If you push D'Angelo away based on evidence that we already know is planted." "I'm playing into his hands." "Exactly." Giovanna stared at the ceiling. "What do you suggest?" "I suggest we find the real source of this intelligence leak. Quietly, without alerting whoever is feeding information to Moretti." Kiara stood. "And in the meantime, I suggest you have an honest conversation with the man you're holding prisoner in your basement." "He's not in the basement." "Close enough." Giovanna almost smiled. "Almost. You know," she said quietly, 3 years ago, you told me that trusting anyone would be the death of me. I also told you that isolation would kill you slower, but just as surely." Kiara paused at the door. "I'm not saying D'Angelo is innocent. I'm saying we don't have enough evidence either way. And until we do, maybe, just maybe, you should give him the benefit of the doubt." She left without waiting for a response. Giovanna sat in the silence for a long time. Then she stood and walked toward the secure wing of the villa. The room where Cristiano was being held was comfortable, more guest suite than prison cell, but the locked door made its true purpose clear. 2 guards stood outside, straightening when they saw Giovanna approach. "Leave us," she said. They hesitated. "Now." They left. Giovanna unlocked the door herself and stepped inside. Cristiano was standing by the window, looking out at the first pale hints of dawn. He turned when he heard her enter, and the hope that flickered across his face made her heart ache. "Have you come to interrogate me?" he asked. "I've come to apologize." His eyebrows rose. "The file was planted," she continued, closing the door behind her. We've traced the materials to suppliers connected to Moretti. Whatever you're being accused of, you didn't do it. I told you that hours ago. I know. She moved further into the room. And I should have believed you. Instead, I did exactly what Moretti wanted. I let fear override judgment. Cristiano studied her face. You had every reason to be suspicious. Evidence appeared. You reacted appropriately. I reacted like a paranoid dictator, not like a rational leader. Giovanna stopped a few feet away from him, and certainly not like someone who was beginning to care about you. The words landed between them with the weight of confession. Beginning to? Cristiano asked softly. More than beginning. She met his eyes. That's what frightened me. That's what Moretti understood. He knew that if he could make me doubt you, he could break something in me that I didn't even realize had started to form. And now I'm done being manipulated. Giovanna took a breath. I'm done letting fear control my choices. And I'm done pretending that what I feel for you is anything less than real. Cristiano moved toward her. What exactly do you feel? I feel like I've spent 3 years building walls to protect myself from exactly this moment. She didn't step back as he approached. I feel like every instinct I have is screaming that this is dangerous, reckless, potentially catastrophic for everything I've built. And yet here I am. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Unable to stay away. Unable to stop wanting something I know I shouldn't want. He was close now, close enough to touch. What do you want, Giovanna? I want. She trailed off, then laughed softly at her own hesitation. I want to know what it feels like to trust someone. Really trust them. Not because they fear me, or owe me, or want something from me, but because they choose to be trusted. I choose. You don't know what you're choosing. I know exactly what I'm choosing. He reached up slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. I'm choosing a woman who carries the weight of an empire on her shoulders and still finds time to ride motorcycles through mountain passes. I'm choosing someone who laughs at my jokes even when armed men are waiting to escort her away. I'm choosing the most remarkable, complicated, infuriating, beautiful person I've ever met. Infuriating. You did just imprison me in your basement. It's not a basement. Close enough. Despite everything, she smiled. And then, without quite deciding to do it, she rose on her toes and kissed him. It was a brief kiss, barely more than a brush of lips, but it felt like a seal on something that couldn't be unsaid. When she pulled back, his eyes were wide with wonder. Was that a choice? She said softly. My choice. The first real choice I've made for myself in 3 years. Giovanna. Don't. She stepped back slightly, though her hand found his and held on. Don't say anything romantic. Don't make promises we don't know if we can keep. Just stay. Help me figure out who's betraying us both. And then we'll see what happens next. That sounds remarkably reasonable. I'm occasionally capable of reason. Occasionally. She squeezed his hand. Don't push your luck. Over the days that followed, they began to build something neither had expected. It started with intelligence work, Cristiano using his business contacts to trace the origins of the planted evidence, while Giovanna's people quietly investigated the potential leak in her organization. They worked side by side in her study, poring over documents, making connections, slowly assembling a picture of Moretti's conspiracy. But somewhere along the way, the work became something more. They talked about their childhoods, their losses, their fears, about the burdens they carried and the people they had become, about the futures they had once imagined and the realities they had accepted instead. Cristiano told her about his father's final days, how the proud man had wasted away from cancer, apologizing for things Cristiano didn't understand until he found the hidden files after the funeral. Giovanna told him about her brothers, twins who had been everything she wasn't, confident and reckless and absolutely certain of their place in the world, until a car bomb ended their certainty forever. They ate meals together. They rode motorcycles through the hills when the tension became too much. They fell asleep in armchairs while reviewing documents and woke to find themselves leaning against each other, hands still intertwined. It was both of them realized the closest thing to courtship either had ever experienced. "I should warn you," Giovanna said one evening as they walked through the villa's ancient gardens, "that this can't stay secret forever. Eventually, Moretti will make another move, and the council will demand to know what's happening between us." "I assumed as much. And when that happens, there will be questions about your family, about your grandfather, about the Bellini connection." Cristiano nodded slowly. "Have you spoken to Chiara about it?" "We've discussed it." Giovanna paused beside a fountain that had been trickling water for 400 years. "She doesn't blame you for your grandfather's actions. But she also hasn't decided how she feels about us." "That's fair. It's complicated. Everything about you is complicated." He turned to face her. "That's part of why I'm still here." "Only part. The other parts involve your smile, your laugh, your terrifying intelligence, and the way you look on a motorcycle." His eyes softened. "But mostly, I'm here because you're the first person I've ever met who makes me want to be better than I am." Giovanna felt warmth spread through her chest. "That's dangerously close to romantic. I warned you that I was brave. You warned me that you were optimistically reckless." "Same thing." She laughed, that genuine sound that still surprised her every time it emerged. "Come on," she said, taking his hand. "We have work to do." The break in the case came a week later. Chiara burst into the study where Giovanna and Cristiano were working, her face flushed with a combination of triumph and rage. "I found him," she said. "Found who?" "The leak." Chiara threw a file onto the desk. "Marco Tesori, one of our logistics coordinators. He's been passing information to Moretti for the past 8 months." Giovanna opened the file. Marco Tesori, the same young man who had interrupted her conversation with Cristiano at the cafe. The same one who had rushed to deliver news about Chiara's arrival. The same one who had been positioned perfectly to observe her every move for months. "How did you find him?" "Followed the money." Chiara's voice was cold. "Moretti set up a shell company to pay him." "Stupid mistake. Used some of the same infrastructure he used to create the fake evidence against D'Angelo." "Where is he now?" "Being held at the northern facility." Chiara's expression hardened. "He's asking for you. Says he'll only talk to the Black Queen directly." Giovanna rose from her chair. "Then let's not keep him waiting." The northern facility was a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of an industrial district, the kind of place that no one would look at twice, and that no one ever left without permission. Marco Tesori was seated in a metal chair in the center of an empty room, his wrists bound, his face pale with fear. When Giovanna entered, he actually started to cry. "Donna Ricci," he babbled. "Please, you have to understand. I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice." Giovanna stopped several feet away from him, her expression unreadable. "You chose to betray me. Now you'll choose to tell me everything, or you'll choose to make this much more unpleasant than it needs to be." "I'll tell you everything. I swear." "Then start from the beginning."
And he did.
Marco had been approached by Moretti's people almost a year ago, shortly after the council meeting where Giovanna had first consolidated her power. They had offered him money. More money than he could make in a decade of legitimate work. All he had to do was share information. Just small things at first. Schedules.
Routes.
The kind of details that seemed harmless. By the time he realized what he was really involved in, it was too late to back out. "They said they would kill my family," Marco sobbed. "My mother, my sisters, they showed me photographs. They knew where everyone lived, where my nieces went to school. So you sold me out to protect them." I didn't know what else to do. Giovanna studied the broken man before her. Part of her wanted to be angry, to give the order that would ensure Marco Tesori never betrayed anyone again. He had endangered everything she had built. He had nearly succeeded in destroying her chance at happiness with Cristiano. He had earned whatever punishment she chose to deliver. But another part of her remembered what it felt like to be trapped by circumstances beyond your control. To make impossible choices, because the alternative was worse. "The file that was planted in D'Angelo's office," she said quietly. "Did you prepare it?" "Yes." Marco couldn't meet her eyes. "They gave me a list of documents to gather. I compiled them over several weeks, then delivered them to a contact who put them where they would be found." And the plan was for me to discover the file, believe D'Angelo was a spy, and eliminate him myself. Yes. Which would have isolated me further, made me look paranoid, given Moretti grounds to question my judgment before the council. I don't know about all that. Marco finally looked up. I just know what they told me to do. They said it would protect my family. And instead, it nearly destroyed mine. The words came out before Giovanna realized she had thought them.
Mine.
When had Cristiano become hers? She turned to Chiara, who had been standing silently by the door. His family, the mother, the sisters. Are they actually in danger? Chiara consulted her phone.
We've located them.
No signs of surveillance, but that doesn't mean Moretti won't follow through on his threats once he realizes Marco has been captured. Bring them in. Protective custody until this is resolved. Marco's eyes went wide. You're going to protect them? I'm going to do what Moretti should have expected. Giovanna's voice was ice. I'm going to prove that loyalty to me means something, even when that loyalty has been broken. She turned to leave. What about me? Marco called after her. What happens to me? Giovanna paused at the door. That depends entirely on what happens next. You've given me information. Now I need to decide whether it's enough to justify letting you live. She walked out without looking back. The council meeting was called for the following evening. It took place in the same palazzo as before, in the same Renaissance hall with its scarred oak table and faded frescoes. But this time, when Giovanna walked in, she was not alone. Cristiano D'Angelo walked beside her. The reaction was immediate. Voices rose. Chairs scraped. Don Calabrese actually stood up in shock. But the loudest reaction came from Ruggiero Moretti, whose face went from confident to alarmed in the space of a heartbeat. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. That man is not a member of the council. He has no right. He has every right. Giovanna took her seat at the head of the table, and Cristiano settled into the chair beside her, the chair that had been empty at every previous meeting. Because as of this moment, Cristiano D'Angelo is under my personal protection. Any threat to him will be considered a threat to me. Moretti's eyes narrowed. This is highly irregular. So, is planting evidence to frame an innocent man? Giovanna smiled coldly. I have proof, Ruggiero. Your operative has been captured. Your shell companies have been traced. Your entire conspiracy has been documented and distributed to secure locations that will release their contents if anything happens to me or to Senior D'Angelo. Silence fell over the room. I don't know what you're talking about, Moretti said, but his voice lacked conviction. Let me refresh your memory. Giovanna nodded to Chiara, who began distributing folders to each member of the council. 8 months of surveillance records. Financial transactions tracing payments from your accounts to the traitor who infiltrated my organization. Communications intercepts proving your coordination with external parties. And most damning of all, a detailed plan for my removal that you apparently began drafting more than a year ago. Don Calabrese was already reading his folder, his expression growing darker with each page. Ruggiero, he said slowly. Is any of this true? Of course not. It's obvious fabrication. The documents have been authenticated by independent sources, Chiara interrupted. We anticipated that claim and prepared accordingly. This is outrageous. I will not sit here and be accused. You will sit exactly where you are. Giovanna's voice cut through his protests like a blade. You challenged my leadership on grounds of succession. You questioned my judgment. You attempted to isolate me from potential allies and destroy my reputation. She stood. And you failed. The room was absolutely silent. The council has a choice to make, Giovanna continued. You can support a man who has been proven, beyond any doubt, to be working against the interests of our alliance. Or you can support a leader who has spent 3 years making us stronger, richer, and more powerful than we have ever been. She looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. Choose wisely. The vote was not close. 8-3 in favor of stripping Moretti of his position and placing him under council censure pending a full investigation. The 3 dissenting votes came from his known allies, and even they looked uncomfortable casting them. Moretti was escorted from the room by guards who had once answered to him. As he passed Giovanna's chair, he paused. "This isn't over," he whispered. "Yes, it is." She met his eyes without flinching. "You underestimated me. That was your first mistake. And your last." He was led away. The remaining council members congratulated her, expressed their continued support, and carefully avoided looking at Cristiano too directly. Only Don Calabrese lingered after the others had gone. "You've handled this well," he said quietly. "Better than your father would have. Better than anyone expected. Thank you. But the question of succession remains." He glanced at Cristiano. "Is this your answer? A legitimate businessman with a complicated family history?" Giovanna considered the question. "This is my choice," she said finally. "What it becomes, that remains to be seen." Calabrese nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope it works out."
You deserve some happiness, Giovanna.
"Heaven knows you've earned it." Then he was gone. They drove back to the villa in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind shared by people who no longer felt the need to fill every moment with words. The moon was rising over the hills when they arrived, casting silver light across the gardens and the ancient stone walls. Giovanna led Cristiano to the terrace overlooking the valley below. "So," she said quietly, "now you know." "Know what?" "What my life is actually like. The politics. The danger. The constant maneuvering and suspicion." She turned to face him. "This is what you're getting into, Cristiano. This is what being with me means." "I know. And you're not running?" "I've already told you." He moved closer. "I'm not going anywhere. Even after everything that's happened? The accusations, the imprisonment, the fact that people tried to kill you because of your connection to me? Especially after all of that." He took her hands in his. "Because now I know something important." "What?" "I know that you fight for the people you care about. That you don't give up, even when the evidence seems overwhelming. That you're capable of mercy even when revenge would be easier." His green eyes held hers. "I know that you're exactly the kind of person I want to spend my life with." Giovanna's heart skipped. "Cristiano, I'm not proposing." He smiled slightly. "Not yet. I know better than to rush someone like you into anything. But I am telling you that I'm in this, completely, totally, whatever it takes in this." She looked at him, this man who had walked into her life by accident and stayed through chaos. This man who had seen her at her most paranoid and controlling and still chose to stand beside her. This man who made her feel like a person instead of a title. "I'm terrified," she admitted quietly. "So am I. I don't know how to do this. Any of this." "Neither do I." He squeezed her hands. "But I figure we can learn together." She laughed, that genuine sound that came so easily now. "You really are optimistically reckless." "You love it." The word hung between them. Love. Neither had said it yet. Neither was quite ready. But looking at each other in the moonlight, both of them knew it was coming. And for the first time in years, neither of them was afraid of what came next. 3 months passed. Moretti's power continued to crumble as the full extent of his betrayal came to light. Several of his closest allies quietly distanced themselves, seeking favor with Giovanna before they could be implicated. The man himself was confined to his own territories, stripped of council voting rights, and watched constantly by people who reported directly to Chiara. He was not dead, not yet, but his ability to threaten Giovanna had been permanently neutralized. Meanwhile, Cristiano became an increasingly familiar presence in Giovanna's world. Not as a member of the organization, he maintained the separation between his legitimate business and her empire, but as her partner in every other sense. They attended public events together, weathering the speculation and the whispers with matched composure. They spent weekends at his villa in the hills, riding motorcycles and pretending to be ordinary people. They argued about business strategy and reconciled over wine and fell into patterns that felt increasingly like home. And somewhere along the way, the word that had been hanging between them finally found its voice. It happened on a quiet evening in late spring, in the garden where they had first talked about choosing to trust. "I love you," Giovanna said. She hadn't planned to say it. The words simply emerged, as natural as breathing.
Cristiano stopped walking. What?
I love you. She turned to face him. I should have said it weeks ago. Maybe months. But I kept waiting for the right moment, the perfect circumstances, and then I realized that there's no such thing. There's just us and whatever we choose to build together. His face transformed, from surprise to joy to something she could only describe as wonder. Say it again. I love you, Cristiano D'Angelo. I love your stubbornness and your courage, and the way you refuse to be afraid of me. I love that you see who I really am and choose to stay anyway. I love that you make me laugh and think and feel things I thought I'd forgotten how to feel. Giovanna. And I know this isn't simple. I know there will be challenges and dangers, and people who will try to tear us apart. But I also know that whatever comes next, I want to face it with you. He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and kissed her. This kiss was nothing like their first, not brief or tentative. This was a claiming, a declaration, a seal on everything they had been building for months. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. I love you too, he said against her lips. In case that wasn't clear. She laughed. Reasonably clear. I should probably make it more explicit. He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. I love you, Giovanna Ricci. The Black Queen, the motorcycle rider, the woman who terrifies powerful men and cries during sad movies. I love every complicated, extraordinary, impossible part of you. I don't cry during sad movies. You cried last week during that film about the dog. That was allergies. It was absolutely not allergies. She kissed him again, partly to shut him up and partly because she couldn't imagine not kissing him. When they separated, the moon was rising and the garden was silver with light. So, Cristiano said softly, what happens now? Giovanna considered the question. Now we start building something real. Something that matters. She took his hand. Together. The wedding took place on an autumn afternoon 6 months later. It was held at the villa in the hills, the same place where they had spent their first long night together, surrounded by suspicion and uncertainty. The same place where they had fallen in love. The guest list was carefully curated, family, trusted allies, and a few members of the council who had proven their loyalty during the Moretti crisis. Chiara served as Giovanna's witness, her sharp brown eyes suspiciously bright throughout the ceremony. Giovanna wore a simple white gown that her grandmother would have approved of, elegant without being ostentatious, powerful without being intimidating. Her raven hair was loose around her shoulders, caught here and there by small diamond pins that caught the light. Cristiano wore a charcoal suit that matched his eyes and couldn't stop smiling. The ceremony itself was brief. They were neither of them people who needed elaborate words to express what they felt. A few traditional vows, an exchange of rings, and then, finally, the kiss that made everything official. When they turned to face their guests as husband and wife, the applause was genuine. Even Don Calabrese was smiling. You know, Cristiano murmured as they walked down the makeshift aisle together, I still remember the first thing you ever said to me. What was that? Flattery from a stranger. How original. Giovanna laughed. I was trying to discourage you. It didn't work. Obviously not. They reached the edge of the terrace, where the reception was beginning to take shape. Below them, the valley stretched out in the golden light of late afternoon, the same view they had shared so many times, the same landscape that had witnessed their transformation from strangers to something infinitely more. Any regrets? Cristiano asked quietly. Giovanna looked at him. This man who had walked into her life by accident and stayed through intention. This man who saw her completely and loved her anyway. This man who had proven, time and again, that strength and tenderness weren't opposites but complements. Not one, she said. And she meant it. In the months and years that followed, the story of the Black Queen and her unlikely consort became something of a legend. They said she had fallen in love with a stranger in a roadside cafe, not knowing that fate had brought them together for reasons neither understood. They said he had seen through her disguise, recognized her true nature, and chosen her anyway. They said their partnership had made the Ricci organization stronger than ever before, legitimate business interests expanding alongside the traditional empire, creating something new and lasting. Some of it was true. All of it was exaggerated. But the core of the legend, the part about two people finding each other against impossible odds and building something that mattered, that part was entirely accurate. Giovanna never stopped being the Black Queen. The title was hers by right and by conquest, and she wore it with the same grace she had always shown. But she was no longer only the queen. She was also a wife, a partner, and eventually a mother. 3 daughters who inherited their mother's amber eyes and their father's easy smile. Cristiano never officially entered the Mafia world. He maintained the separation between his legitimate empire and his wife's shadow kingdom, serving as bridge and buffer between the two. But everyone knew that to threaten him was to threaten her, and to threaten her was to invoke consequences no one wanted to face. They argued, as all couples do. They reconciled, as all couples must. They built a life that was neither fully legitimate nor fully criminal, but something new, a synthesis of their two worlds that made both of them stronger. And on quiet evenings, when the children were sleeping and the business of empire had paused for the night, they would sometimes ride their motorcycles through the mountain passes where they had first met. Just 2 people, chasing the sunset. Just 2 hearts, finally home. Chiara stood on the terrace of the Ricci Palazzo, watching the sun set over the hills. Behind her, the sounds of a family gathering filled the ancient halls, children laughing, adults debating, the clatter of dishes being prepared for dinner. 15 years had passed since that autumn day at the roadside cafe. 15 years since a confident stranger had approached the most dangerous woman in Italy and asked to buy her an espresso. 15 years since everything had changed. "You're being contemplative," Giovanna said, appearing at her side. "I'm being nostalgic." Chiara smiled slightly. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Contemplation looks forward. Nostalgia looks back. Chiara turned to face her oldest friend. "I was thinking about your grandmother, about what she would say if she could see all this." Giovanna considered. "She would probably critique my choice of wine for dinner." "Probably."
Chiara laughed.
"But she would also be proud. You've done everything she hoped for and more. We've done everything." Giovanna touched Chiara's shoulder. "I couldn't have built any of this without you." Flatterer. Truth-teller. From inside the house, Cristiano's voice called out, "Gia, the girls are asking about the motorcycle story again." Giovanna rolled her eyes affectionately. "They've heard it 100 times. They want to hear it again." "That story gets more dramatic every time he tells it," Chiara observed. "He claims artistic license. He claims a lot of things." They exchanged a glance, then both laughed.
"Go," Chiara said.
"Your family is waiting." Giovanna hesitated. "Your family too," she said quietly. "You always have been." Chiara's eyes softened. "I know." Giovanna squeezed her hand once, then turned and walked inside. Chiara remained on the terrace a moment longer, watching the last light fade from the sky. Somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle engine growled to life. Probably one of the security teams doing a perimeter check. But for a moment it sounded like something else. Like the beginning of a story. Like the promise of something unexpected. Like the sound of 2 people discovering that love was possible even in the most impossible circumstances. Chiara smiled to herself. Then she turned and went inside to join her family for dinner. The moon rose over the hills of northern Italy, casting silver light across ancient stones and modern dreams. In a villa that had witnessed generations of power and passion, a family gathered around a table laden with food and wine and laughter. A man who had once been a confident stranger told a story about a motorcycle and a cafe, and a woman who changed his life. A woman who had once been only a title listened to her daughter's questions and felt her heart expand with joy. And somewhere in the shadows, guards kept watch, not because they feared what might come, but because they understood the value of what had been built.
Love, trust, partnership.
The things that no amount of power could buy, but that power could be used to protect. The Black Queen had found her king. And together, they had built a kingdom worth defending. The end.